delighted to be with you today, Adriana, and thank you so much for joining today and being willing to talk about your own spiritual awakening experiences. It takes courage to do that in the world today, and especially since you're a clinical psychologist, a podcaster, and also very interested in this area, I'm especially delighted that you're willing to join us. So thank you. And I do
Thanks
have
so
some
much for
questions
having
to ask. Yes, you're so welcome. So I do have some questions, and it basically asks to start from the beginning, like when did you first start moving into what you would call part of your awakening history?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was definitely an early moment when my father died when I was 15. And I had a really interesting, what I would now call synchronistic experience, where I was walking through Grand Central Station. I was living in New York at the time. And this random Hare Krishna guy that I would never have spoken to normally. My mom taught me don't talk to strange people who are probably trying to sell you something. But this guy had this book that he put in my hand. He's like, "You need to have this," and it was called "Coming Back: The Science of Reincarnation." And that was my first exposure to something along the lines of life beyond death, which was really helpful in losing my dad because I did sense his presence around me, and that book really helped to normalize that. That was like an early glimmer of like let's say a more spiritual kind of experience, but the real awakening came in my 20s, in my mid 20s. After college, I had taken some time off, was living in Vail, Colorado, and just having a lot of fun, but then started becoming very sick, started becoming very depressed, and getting sicker and sicker, to the point where I was becoming allergic to everything in my environment. My immune system was extremely compromised. It became harder and harder to function, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on with me. They gave me a provisional diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome, but it actually took 13 years to properly diagnose me with Lyme disease
Wow,
and all these
13
co-occurring
years.
things that come with it. Yeah, 13 years to get that diagnosis. And so I was really, really sick. And Western medicine had nothing for me, or even had, very dismissive comments like, well, it's all in your head because we can't figure out what it is. So it must be in your head, right? So I had to go on my own journey. And I think that that's really what that was for me, was my journey into healing, my journey into holistic alternative therapies. It became a spiritual journey because at the time, when I was most sick, I also was called to go to grad school, where you also went to grad school at ITP, the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. And between my own healing process, going to different practitioners, acupuncturists, chiropractors, and then energy workers, and I even saw a shaman at one point, and then I'm going to a school where we're learning about different types of spirituality, and we're doing a year of yoga and a year of aikido, and all these things really took me on this deep dive that I now see as was like the shaman's calling. And it was a calling for me to do my own healing and then be able to work with healing others. It was a dark night of the soul because I really had everything in my life was upended. At 29 years old, I had the biological markers of a 69-year-old. So I was really
Wow.
debilitated, and don't think I would still be alive today had I not been able to heal myself. And essentially, over the course of 17 years, I was able to heal myself from the Lyme disease. I'm now happy and healthier than I've ever been. And my spirituality just keeps growing and evolving with all different kinds of things now. But that was the initial awakening and journey. And it was definitely, it was like, I mean, you can't even put words to it, how horrible it was. I mean, I spent most of grad school like laid down flat on my back because I couldn't even lift my head. I was so sick.
So it sounds like you were kind of put down by Western medicine, the conventional biomedical approach, and you found support in other areas. And I'm not here to say well, I didn't come to conclusion that you hate doctors. I'm just saying you were finding more
Oh.
support outside of the conventional Western medicine. Would you kind of say a little bit more about what brought you into that shamanic knowing or initiation?
Well, I mean, we studied shamanism at ITP. I was lucky enough to have a class where we journeyed every week, right? And so that was pretty cool, and there were other modalities that I was exploring, as well, but that felt I felt pulled toward that, and now again, knowing a lot more than I did back then, I have had many lifetimes as a shaman, as a medicine person, as a curandera. I mean, whatever you want to call it. And so that's just been reinforced to me. And I work now as I continue to work on myself and healing things. I work with a shaman regularly, and have seen people in Brazil when we went to Brazil together. I had an experience with some Brazilian shamans after our workshop. So I find that modality or way of seeing illness and healing and spirituality, it speaks to me, but so do so many others. I'm definitely not exclusive to just that way of seeing things.
But it does sound like that's been an important part of your journey, just to put it
Yeah.
that way. And
Yes.
and the would are you okay talking about the kind of shamanism because there's so many. For instance, some
Yeah.
really get into plant medicines and psychedelics, as it were, and some
hmm
don't. And so there are lots of variations on the theme of shamanism. Could you say which has been most supportive for you in your healing process or your journey to wholeness?
Actually say there have been different ones, but I would say the more spirit shamanism. So working with beyond the beings beyond the veil, right? Working with first it was people who have died. I recognize that I had the ability, that I had my own like medium kind of psychic capacities, and I was able to communicate with loved ones or people who had passed. Or I would be I'm a psychologist, I would be in therapy sessions, and someone's deceased loved one would suddenly show up in the room, and the next thing I know, I'm facilitating family therapy with someone who's not in a body, because I'm able to, I have strong clairaudience. I could hear what they were saying, and I could communicate that to my client, or help my client to try to connect with that knowing within themselves to be able to communicate with their loved one. And then it moved into being able to communicate with nature spirits and elementals. And now in the last few couple of years, it's been interdimensional and extraterrestrial type beings. It's really expanded into all these realms, and I have a council of all different kinds of beings that I work with, again, both for my own healing and growth in consciousness, but also they can help me in the sessions that I do with my clients. So I'd say that kind of form of spirit of shamanism has been super helpful. Altered states of consciousness have also played a role. Plant medicines, I mean, part of what helped me to even heal from the Lyme disease was actually homeopathics and these herbs that my naturopath was getting from South America. So, plant medicine of all different kinds, not just psychedelic, types, but that also was a big part of my healing journey. I had a lot of recreational drug use in my time in Colorado and even here in California. And doing plant medicines like the psychedelics, like ayahuasca or psilocybin, or any of the others that are out there, doing them in a more sacred kind of ritual way is really different from using them recreationally at a party, at an event, and even at an outdoor festival or something like that is very different. And I've definitely received benefit from those modalities as well. But I think it's the work with the spirits that's been the most profound and life altering for me.
Adriana, I love hearing this story, and I'm thanking you so much for telling more of the story. And one of the thoughts I have is that you said it quite clearly that you have worked with several shamans, and think that it's really important for people to get some guidance, especially if they're sensitive and have psychic abilities, which clearly you do. So, how how can what can you say to people who might be looking for someone who can give them the appropriate guidance around this? Let's say they are sensitive like you are. How do they find someone?
I mean, I do believe that when you put the question out there, ask and receive is a real thing. So, when the student is ready, the master will appear. It's kind of been like that for me. It's been fairly synchronistic. I mean, just recently, I went to the Conscious Life Expo in LA like a month ago and sat in on a workshop where they were doing remote viewing. Some of the people we probably knew our professors in grad school, these folks were doing a talk on remote viewing. And then one of the guys, I clicked on his website and he's doing retreats in Sedona, and you can learn remote viewing, and there's some mediumship aspect to it and telekinesis. And I was like, oh, that, and I just, because I had met him there, and then I went, it's like sort of that synchronistic kind of thing. And it was lovely. And I had a great time. Went on a retreat to Sedona with my friend and had an amazing time. So sometimes I think it's like that. It can be word of mouth. Knowing someone who's worked with someone. I think a lot of my people in my circle, we tend to like, who are you watching and listening to these days? With the Brazilian shamans, I happen to have my virtual assistant who works with me is Brazilian. Himself happened to be a part of a shamanic lineage and was studying to become a facilitator of ayahuasca ceremonies. So he helped me get set up with those shamans down there that I did a ceremony with and have worked with a bit since then. So I think it's all different kinds of ways. Maybe it's by, in this day and age, seeing someone's on a podcast or reading a book that they've written. I know Shift Network, for example, is working a lot with Puma, I forget his name, down in South America. They're leading retreats down there. So maybe you have a course with Puma on the Shift Network and you get to him that way. I mean, so many different routes. But put the question out there. Start with the question. Like, I'm curious about this. Who, universe, show me, who can teach me, who can guide me with this, who can be a mentor. You'd be amazed at how miraculously you can be led with that.
That's a beautiful way of looking at it. And so, how would you say your life has changed as a result of the shamanic work that you've been doing and the awakening work that's come through your shamanic work?
Yeah, I mean, my whole course of my life changed from that experience, of getting sick. And I mean, I already knew I was going to be a therapist. I mean, I had the calling from a very young age to be someone who works in the therapy space to help people who are suffering. But I mean, at first I thought I would be a doctor like my dad. I thought I was going to be a psychiatrist. And then I thought, oh, I'll just go to like regular grad school and get, because I hated organic chemistry. And I was like, I can't do like med school if this is what it's going to be like. And also, I don't want to write prescriptions for people, which it kind of seems like that's what psychiatrists are doing these days. So, I nixed that in college, but just thought I would go for a regular PhD at a major university and do my research and, all the things. And it was getting sick that got me into the more holistic and the spiritual and the transpersonal, right? Getting that kind of education and working now in that way with a lot of, I would say, more holistic therapies, energy psychology, things like that. It's doing all of that. I wouldn't have gone down that route. I would have stayed like stuck in my head the way I was in college. I didn't even know I had a body. I didn't know about, I was curious about spirituality, but I mean, I don't think I would have ended up anywhere had I not had that initial illness, the dark night of the soul, and the seeing it through that shamanic lens of, they say in shamanism, when it comes to illness, in the healer's journey, it's like change yourself so much that the disease can no longer recognize you and find you. And I feel like that's what it was for me. Going to ITP, choosing that less traditional path, profoundly altered me as a person, and then the work that I do and everything that's come since then.
Thank you. So it's important for people to know what's on the other side of all the change and also what kind of guidance might be appropriate for them. Any other kind of advice you would like to give in terms of assisting people who might be in a process of this dark night of the soul through illness? Just what comes to mind in terms of how you might be able to assist them from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, whether it's showing up through a life crisis like illness, it might be something else, a loss of some sort. It could be a Kundalini awakening. I mean, all different ways in which, a spiritual awakening can, a mental health crisis that often shows up that way. Addiction, I work a lot with addiction. There's so many paths, but I would say if you have the sense that what you're dealing with is a spiritual awakening, and if it's uncomfortable, we talk about spiritual emergency. Sometimes people end up in those circumstances. Seek help from someone who is trained in these types of modalities. The challenge in our field, and you and I have talked about this before when you were a guest on my podcast, Emma, how the traditional Western psychiatric paradigm, if you were to go into a regular therapist or doctor psychiatrist with some of the symptoms that someone having an episode like this might be going through, you could be misdiagnosed. You could be called psychotic. You could be put on a bunch of really powerful medications that aren't really going to help you with your spiritual awakening process. If anything, it might numb that to some degree. So I would say try to see a professional, either a licensed mental health person who's had additional training, like there are, through your university, IMHU, you're offering trainings for professionals like myself to get a specialty training in this area. Assist was an organization I worked with that I got some training from. Like, find people who know what they're doing to support you in the process. A traditional therapist or psychiatrist is probably not going to know about this as well. Also, find community. There are lots of communities, online, in person. There are spiritual centers. There are like SAI, Spiritual Awakenings International, ASSIST, the American Center for the Integration of Spiritually Transformative Experiences. There are a lot of different groups where people are sharing their experiences of spiritual awakening, emergency, and you can find support and know that you're not alone. I think all of those things are going to be helpful. And then also to work with things holistically. I think if whatever you're dealing with, a health issue, a mental health issue, an addiction, trauma, whatever it is, it has physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual components to it. And you have to address all of those for real healing to occur. See the doctor, get medical assistance if you need it, if you're having an illness. I mean, there were times when I was seeing a Lyme literate medical doctor and I was doing like IV therapies and things like that. Like, there was a place for it. And there might be a place, for you with Western medicine. Seek the traditional, non-traditional practitioners. Look at the energy. Acupuncture is so wonderful for so many different things. Work with unresolved trauma is a big piece. That was a huge piece of my illness, was that I had unresolved trauma from my childhood. Now I know from other lifetimes that I was carrying that was debilitating my functioning. I mean, my gosh, try to work with people in all of those ways: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. That's how true healing will occur. It's never going to be one thing. There was no one magic thing, not even shamanism, that helped me heal. It was a combination of modalities, a combination of different kinds of practitioners, and a determination, more than anything else. I was determined to beat this. I was not going to let this thing take me out.
Thank you so much. Beautifully put. Anything more that you'd like to say as we approach the end of this interview? Last words?
Just to give people hope, right? Like, no matter how painful it feels, no matter how dark your dark night gets, no matter how sick you get, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. If you're willing to just never give up, never give in, and just keep seeking and keep asking the universe. There are so many beings out there that are there to support us. Ask for the guidance, ask for the support. You will be led to something that will help you.
Okay, that's a wonderful positive message. Thank you so much, and I appreciate your time very much. You're welcome. Until we meet again, huh? Bye bye.
Yes.